Welcome. So in front of me I have a Samsung Galaxy S21 and today I'll go over unboxing along with an overview. Now in terms of unboxing there is not much, to be completely honest with you. As you can see, we have some paperwork, we don't care about that one. We got a phone and we got charging cable, and that's about all we get in here. So just drag the charging cable out, there we go. So boom, done with unboxing really quick. There's a phone. Now I will mention I did already go to the setup of it, so we don't have to, but in all honesty we probably already seen the setup of a Samsung device. Oh, look at that, and there's an update apparently. Disregard it for now, let's get rid of it. So straight to the specifications of this device. This is a 6.2 inch display, so it's going to be one of the smallest one out of the new lineup of Samsung phones. This is basically the lowest model, and then it does have a just a 1080p resolution, which personally I am completely fine with it. It seems to be well adequate. If you compare it to, for instance, the S20s, the last year model, I believe they did have the ability to go higher in resolution, but then if you wanted to use high refresh rate, you still had to drop it down, so it didn't really matter. So here we have basically the same thing without actually high resolution, but we are running at 120 hertz when it needed, and then drop it to like 60 or even sometimes 40, depending on what the device sees as a need. And now this is right now, I believe, set to the adaptive refresh rate, which, like I said, just drops it down to, in certain cases, to like 40 frames. And if you're wondering what might be the purpose of that, is if you're, for instance, looking at something like a picture, let's be honest, you don't need high refresh rate, the image ain't moving. But then when you start actually moving between pages, well, then that's when refresh rate picks up, and then it goes to 120, so you get that super smooth transitions between like pages and just really buttery smooth animations, which is a really nice feature here. But finishing up the display, like I said, it's a 1080p, so 1080 by 2400 with a 421 pixels per inch and 87.2% screen to body ratio. Honestly, the screen to body ratio might seem personally like it's a little bit higher. The bezels are here fairly minimal. They are a little bit thicker. If you would compare it to something like a phone with a curved display, then that percentage would probably be above 90%. But because this is just a flat screen, we lose a little bit of that well, higher percentage screen to body ratio, which is a little bit of a shame. And personally, I would really like to see a curved display. It would add, in my opinion, a little bit more premium feeling to this device, because in all honesty, I can't really say that this is a flagship device anymore. Now, it's not all bad in this case. What they did is what I would call making a flagship spec device with while sacrificing other things that might not be as important. So if you, for instance, if I would have to compare it, if you look, for instance, for the like comparison between S20 lineups and then, for instance, something like an Galaxy A lineups, they usually had well, crappier chipsets. They were a little bit lower in spec and then costed less, right? Later on, they did want to make them a little bit more premium looking, so they look better, but they still were rocking kind of a budget specs, if that makes sense. And what it looks like Samsung is doing right now is taking, for instance, the S lineup as an example, and dividing it into basically different categories of how premium it is. So S lineup, as right now, I would call it, S isn't the flagships, and depending on what you go for. If you go for this one, it does rock the best, well, maybe not this one that I have here, but in normal circumstances, if you're buying it in US, it would be rocking the best Snapdragon on the market, and then have fairly decent cameras, but it's sacrificing on a lot of other things that you might not really need. And honestly, I would say it's okay if you get to pay less for basically flagship performance of a device, but then not actually get certain things that you just simply won't care, then it's a fairly good trade-off. And honestly, before I was kind of crapping on Samsung for the things like, as an example, their Note lineup supposed to be the like top of the line, and with like, for instance, the Note 20 or S20, yeah, Note 20, that wasn't the case. You were basically getting an inferior product if you compare it to like S20 Ultra. So that was a little bit of a shame, but it makes a little bit more sense now if you look at the idea of what they're kind of going for, which is dividing each of their premium lineups to basically have a little bit of a wider array for customers. Some of us just care about raw performance. We don't really, for instance, we might not really care that we don't have glass back, especially if it's decent like it is here. So moving further into the display, which I haven't actually finished. It has, like I said, 120 Hz, that is the max refresh rate here. It's a dynamic AMOLED display. It's basically an AMOLED display with a higher refresh rate. That's basically what it means. It also has a certification for HDR10 Plus. The Plus does matter here. And peaks at 1300 nits. And one last thing, on the front, it has a Gorilla Glass Ventus. So I believe this is the best one at the moment on the market. So all that is fairly nice and all, but when it comes down, I do have to say the display looks really nice. Personally, the size of this display and phone really, at least in my opinion, suits it. I personally was kind of want to get this for myself because the phone is a little bit smaller than you might be used to at the moment. And if you don't really want these obnoxiously big phones where they kind of approach a tablet size almost, then this is one of the smaller flagship spec devices with at least not, this one is kind of like a Snapdragon 865 Plus rather than 888, but that's besides the point. So yeah, I do have to say I really like it. It runs smoothly as it should most likely. It feels really nice in hand. The only thing I would want in this display particularly is a curved display. That's basically the only gripe I have with it. Other than that, the design of it is really nice. Oh, and one more thing maybe, this camera right here. Just hide it or get rid of it, do something to just, I don't know, motorize it. Personally, it's already like past the time Samsung gets rid of that little cutout in there. It's, I would say, kind of unnecessary. A lot of companies managed to do something with it. Samsung just kind of took a laugh at, for instance, Apple for their notch, and then kind of stuck around with the whole package camera, while other companies already decided to completely remove it, which it seems like Samsung might be a little bit behind with this one. Now I understand why they didn't remove it yet, but they should make some kind of moves to nivellating that tiny little hole that is the only remaining part of like the 2019 idea of flagship devices with basically almost full screen. So yeah. Now moving on to the camera, we do have triple camera setup, and from what I've seen or heard, not really seen yet, this is equivalent to like the previous lineups of S20s. So apparently we're not getting much of an upgrade here, but I'm gonna capture a couple photos just so we can see it now. It does come with a little bit of a thingy thing here, so let's get rid of that. Actually, come on. There we go. So there we go. Now we have a nice camera. Now one thing that I will mention right off the bat, it's I don't know if you can see it on like the video, but the actual lenses are recessed in that little of a bump here, which is really nice. So if you slap the phone, your lenses are really not gonna have any way of getting scratched because basically the thing around them protects it. So really nice design here. Overall, the design of the camera looks really nice. I kind of like it. It blends with the frame and looks really nice. But anyway, let's get my plant here. And around the camera. Okay. So I'm just gonna capture a couple photos. It's not gonna be anything, probably anything that will put this camera into actual like hardcore testing. So whatever you get here, it's just gonna be mediocre because, well, I'm not a photographer, and number two, it probably would have way more effect when I would go outside and capture those photos myself rather than just kind of like this lit up environment, capture a couple plant photos. But anyway, let's just see what we got here. So this is a 3x zoom. Now the 3x zoom is is basically like without losing any quality, so let's capture that. And then there's the also ultra wide. Okay, so these were, I believe, all 3 lenses. There's the ultra wide, normal, 3x zoom. There's also, what do we got? We got wide, telephoto, ultra, and let's see what else we got. I kind of want to do one more thing, a night photo. So bear with me. I'm going to turn off all the lights that I have here, and the only light that you will have is basically from the 2 monitors that are here. If that's producing way too much light, I'm going to also turn those off. But let's see what we're dealing with here when I basically turn off lighting. Still too much. There we go. So as you can see, it's fairly dark in here, right? Okay, let's see what we got. So this came out really nice, I have to say. Now it is not fully dark in here. If I would probably turn off the thing right here. Oh, it's dark. So let's see what we get with full. That is actually really good. I mean, at least as you can see right here, you basically cannot see anything here apart from like the shadows. So let's see once more. Now I believe it's gonna go to a longer exposure, but we're about to see. Apparently not. Okay, let's bring up the lights. So let's see what we got. Now this is gonna be the like almost fully dark. The only light that was coming out in this photo was straight up from the monitor right here. And even though you can see kind of like the white light, this is straight up from the exposure. The monitor was completely black, and giving off only light was basically like the backlighting of the darkness in that way. Because the only thing that the camera was seeing was because this is basically the monitor that is in here is the feed from the camera itself, and the only thing the camera was seeing is the light from this phone itself, which was mediocre at best. But as you can see on the photo itself, it did do really nicely, I have to say. It does have a little bit of a darker and grainier look to it than I would prefer, but then when you consider the actual lighting conditions and only 2-second exposure time, I would say this is way above what I would be expecting here. Now going back to the other one, this was also a longer exposure, the night photo, but with a little bit more light. That's because there was another monitor turned on, which was actually giving off a little bit, well, decently more light. And as you can see, a decent more amount of light resulted in a photo that is way more exposed compared to the almost fully dark one. And it still does look really nice, and considering, well, how dim it was in here. Now moving on to the normal ones, this is the ultra wide, and if you zoom in, well, it looks to lose quality. I believe it was probably capturing focus, somewhere else. As you can see, if the grain is a little bit more focused inside of the pot rather than the plant itself. But it looks nice. It's a little bit deformed, but then it is captured at really close range, so that's probably the reason for it. And then there is the 3x zoom. Basically lossless zoom, and yeah, that is amazing actually. If you consider that you can zoom into like the single grain, basically like this tiny little thing where basically the spikes are coming out, and seeing like all the fuzz in there, this is really good. And this is the normal wide sensor again. Quality in here is just great. There is no other way to say it. It's amazing. And now this is gonna be still outperformed by things like the S21 Ultra, but still, considering this phone comes around like $700, $600, something like that, I have to say that the cameras here are punching way above what I would be expecting for this price. I mean, it is like, although Samsung, so not sure why I was expecting less. So moving out of here, let's go on to a couple additional things. In terms of video recording, on this phone we have a bunch of options. Some of them might be a little bit redundant because we can record at 8K on here at 24 frames, 4K, 30 and 60 frames. Then if we drop it down to 1080p, we have again 30 and 60 obviously, and then we also have a slow motion of up to 240 frames, and if we decide to drop it even lower, we can get it at 720p resolution at 960 frames. So this is already getting a little bit insane. But still, you have a lot of choices. Now, when it comes down, I believe, to like the 8K, the footage will be a little bit choppy, and I wouldn't say it looks as great as, for instance, if you decide to drop it to the 4K. And also, the 8K will consume a lot of storage. This is basically a huge file format for like a couple minutes of recording. So keep that in mind if you're planning to record at 8K. It might not be the best idea. It's probably more efficient to drop it to the 4K and record at 60 rather than try to get as much of a resolution. It does lose quality at higher at the 8K, with also losing a little bit of that smoothness from 60 frames, and just won't be as great, I would say. Okay. Now, that being said, on the front we do have a 10 megapixel wide sensor, and it also shoots at 4K, 30 and 60, and obviously you can drop it to 1080p and have the same results here. And then lastly, the pure specifications of this device, and that's basically where the European version, in my opinion, kind of falls apart. Now, this is not to be say that the phone is bad, because it's not, but it feels like we're getting an inferior product in Europe, for instance, when you compare it to US. And what I mean by that is this specific model here comes with a Exynos 2100, while US is getting a Snapdragon 888. Now, when you compare the actual benchmarks of these processors, the Exynos version, which is this one, which you pay the same amount for if you were getting the Snapdragon, is basically equivalent to the previous gen Snapdragon. So you're getting basically a last gen Snapdragon with a current price tag for it of this, at least Samsung. And when you compare basically the two devices next to each other, so if you would have two Galaxy's S20s, the one with the Snapdragon from US will outperform the EU version with the Exynos, which is a little bit of a shame because both of them cost the same amount. And you kind of lose a little bit in performance for no reason, which you have to still pay for full price. I kind of feel scammed here, to be perfectly honest, but then I wouldn't be the only one. Basically, the entire Europe is scammed out of a better phone. Now, moving on further, the device actually comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and that's the only version here. It has two different variants in terms of storage, so 128 and 256, and there is no way of expanding it via an SD card. There is no SD card whatsoever here. So a little bit of a bummer here. So if you're planning to record longer videos, 8K or 4K, probably opt out for the about $25 or $50 more expensive 256 gigs instead of the cheaper one. Because once you run out of that storage, you're kind of bummed out. Now, it also comes with a UFS 3.0 that is basically universal no matter what storage you go for, so you're going to be getting really fast transfer, read and write speeds on this storage, so that's really nice. And then when it comes down to the battery, it is a fairly substantial battery size considering the phone is one of the smaller ones, so it comes with a 4000 mAh battery. Now, what it doesn't come with is a charger, so there is no charger whatsoever. Now, this is completely hypocritical, considering literally the last thing that Samsung did with their S20 lineup was making fun of Apple for not including a charger, and lo and behold, Samsung goes and does the same thing basically in the next phones. And obviously, I guess they couldn't resist the money gain that you could have got by removing the charger from manufacturing. But hey, guess what? You can buy it on the site probably for like 25 to 50 bucks, I guess. I haven't checked it, but yeah. Now, apart from that, I'm not sure how much, if any, price was reduced based on the lack of a charger. But the phone right now, the S21, it is one of the cheaper flagships, I would say, at least at the launch, whereas it was bundled up with their Galaxy Beans, also their smartwatch, and some other like weird tracker. And if you would actually remove all those, like sell them for a full price, then you would have got basically the cheapest flagship on the market, I would say. Now the deal is gone. It was basically a pre-sale deal. Now that it's already out, it's not viable anymore, and now it's a little bit less worth the money, I would say. But still, the phone, it is really capable and really nice, even though it is approaching already the flagship spec or flagship price without actually having some of the flagship components, if you know what I mean, especially a charger. So at the beginning, if you would have gotten it with that deal, it was really worth. It was one of the more worth purchases you could have got. But now, if once the price settled down or is still being sold at, for instance, $600-700 without the buds, the watch, and the weird tracker, then the price is more normalized, and you could probably get something as good if you don't mind, for instance, going for something like a Xiaomi or Xiaomi probably is one of the best options here when it comes down to dollar for performance here. And going back to the charger, that it isn't included. If you have a charger, you can charge it with a 25 watts speed on a cable, which is still a little bit slow considering some other companies do it at 120 watts now. But you do have the wireless charging at 15 watts, which is really nice. And then also reverse wireless charging at 4.5 watts. So if you're planning to charge things like headphones, if you have a capable of that headphones of being wirelessly charged, you can just flip it over, slap them on there, and they will get charged. Now, finishing this up, honestly, the phone is a little bit of a mixed bag. I do have to say I'm a little bit biased. I really like this device, primarily because it's super small. It has a 120 Hz display, even though right now it's already not really a novelty. Basically every phone comes with it, but it's still really nice. And I kind of regret that I didn't go for it earlier when it was being pre-sold with a really enticing price for me, because basically at that point it was coming around, what was it, like $550 about. So at that price range, it was just an amazing phone. Now I did kind of hesitate on the price range because I did convert it from my own, and the 550 that I'm saying, it is already with a tax, so keep that in mind. Basically what I mean is I could have gotten it for 3,800 PLN minus the 800 if you substitute and sell everything that it came bundled with. So then it was coming at around 3,000 PLN, making it roughly 550 something dollars, which at that price range, it's just an amazing device, and there is nothing better, I would say. But now at the retail price that it comes with, which is still basically 3,800 without bundling anything with it, it's just a average device, I would say. Now, it's still a capable phone. But that being said, if you're looking for any kind of good flagship device, small size, this is probably one of the smaller ones, unless you're planning to go with an iPhone. iPhone does have the the iPhone 12 mini, which will be actually smaller than this. Keep that in mind. It is a really good device, and basically, if that makes sense, I kind of want to get it myself, and it seems like a really good deal. Now, like I said, once the price drops a little bit further after lunch, that's probably when you should pick it up on sale. That's going to be the best bang for your buck at that price when it's on sale below like around $600. But yeah, the phone is really good, and if you're buying it in US, then well, you're the luckier one because you get the Snapdragon 888, while we here plebs get the Exynos 2100, which at this moment isn't necessarily the greatest processor. But anyway, it is an amazing device nonetheless. Now, that being said, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.